Hello, everyone. This is Michael Hodges, the community father. And until we have our first guest, I will be discussing important topics and solutions for our children's school related problems. And also to give an open invitation to parents, teachers, and leaders to join me in the discussion. So, welcome to the Village Project podcast. And today's topic is going to be a solution oriented mindset. And I'm going to tell you why that's important. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about me. You know, I've just retired from teaching in the school district for 22 and a half years. And, and you know, there are some things that I've witnessed along the way. And I want to talk about those things, but not from a blaming position, but from a solution oriented position. You know, one of my strengths as a teacher was to build rapport with the children. And I worked with a lot of great teachers, a lot of fabulous teachers. And a lot of them had different strengths in other areas. Some of them were very strong academically. Some of them, also like myself, did very well at building rapport. But all in all, I thought and I felt that the group of teachers that I worked with in the 20 plus years that I worked were very, very solid professionals and really had a heart to help the children. But you know, I don't think that it's a secret that people understand that overall our children are struggling in the school system, and especially here in the Antelope Valley, which is where I live and which is where my focus is right now. And I want to first point out some of the things that I believe the problems are, but then I want to jump right into the solution. Okay, you know, I did a study while I was working on my master's, and it was on the disproportionate suspension of African American students. And I really focused on the Antelope Valley, the disproportionate expulsion and suspension of African American students in the Antelope Valley. And I want to read some of the things that I came across. And you know, and then we'll go right into that. Of course, there was I read about implicit bias and racial stereotypes, and you know, if we're all totally honest, I think all of us have a little bit of implicit bias, and I'll give you an example. But when I read these problems, I don't want you to think by any means am I just brushing them over and acting like they're not important, because I do think that they're all important and they all have had some type of impact on the quality that our children. Now, I want you to understand, I'm not just here for African American children. I'm here for all children in the Antelope Valley. But I do want to focus primarily on the African American children right now, because I believe that if we can solve the issues that they're facing, it will solve problems across the board. But one of the things that I found in my study was that one of the problems was implicit bias. And like I said, I myself had it. And here's an instance. One day when I was in the classroom, there was a young man that came into the classroom and he favored my oldest son. He looked just like my oldest son. And so what I found myself doing without realizing is looking out for this young man, protecting him, and just in every way that I could, I was offering him encouragement because he just reminded me of my oldest son. And I just couldn't help it that I took a liking to this young man, even if it was just in the way of looking out for him. And so I know that happens. Now, where is it that African American children are disenfranchised by this, or are at a disadvantage? Well, I think it goes without saying, and it's common knowledge that most teachers are white females. And so at some point, implicit bias plays a part into that. Okay? There's also racial stereotypes, which we get from the media. There's the harsh policies that schools come down with, and in the history, while I was working, there was at one point we had a zero tolerance, for a lot of different things, and so all of these play a part into expulsion and suspension of all kids, but in particularly African American. There's cultural mismatches between teachers and students, as previous discussed. Um, there's a socioeconomic disparities, and then there's trauma that a lot of students. But I want you to understand before you start thinking, oh, here we go again, another CRT or DEI lesson on how we need to treat kids. No, I'm just telling you some of the problems that I saw, but I'm here primarily to talk about solutions. Okay? Um, there was a subjective and disproportionate enforcement of rules, you know, and I've seen this for myself. Whereas African American kid might get suspended for profanity and cussing someone out, a student of a different nationality would get suspended for something uh, serious, like bringing a weapon to school, and not so much for the disrespect. Okay, there's a lack of restorative justice and alternative punishment, which had changed in the time that I was teaching. It had changed because, in fact, my last 10 years as a teacher, I was an in-school intervention teacher, which was an alternative setting for children that were having difficulties in the classroom. So, and there was a restorative justice program where children had a chance to um, up their citizenship grade after it had dropped to a certain level. Okay. Of course, we all know about the historical and institutional racism that have existed in agencies. And then there's the lack of parental advocacy and awareness. Okay. There's the media and societal perception of black youth. And so there's many different things. But I'm going to tell you the one thing that jumped out at me the most when I was doing my studies on the disproportionate expulsion and suspension of African American students, it was that only 35% of African American students were living with both parents. Okay? So that's the thing that jumped out at me out of everything, and to me that spoke of a societal problem. Now, I know that some of you listening, and maybe if not all, are probably thinking, well, there was reasons for that as well. And in fact, I want to touch on some of those things. But like I said, I'm here to find a solution. And as a community, I think that it would suit us if we approached the problems that we're having from a solution-oriented mindset. So let's talk about why so many African American students or children are in a home where there's only one parent. And so, we can go all the way back to slavery, where, parents and families were broken up. We can talk about post-slavery laws, and black codes, and the mass incarceration and Jim Crow laws that separated the father from the home. We could talk about welfare policies where there was a man in the house rule. If there was a man in the home, then the parent or the family didn't qualify for welfare. And a lot of people my age can even probably tell you some of the stories that where they've had to make an adjustment family-wise in order to qualify for public assistance. Okay. Of course, economic discrimination and job loss, the war on drugs and mass incarceration again, and of course we all are aware of how drugs was targeted, whereas drugs that were common in the black community received stiff sentences, whereas drugs that were common in the white community did not. Okay. Cultural shifts and media influence. I mean, this thing goes on and on. Educational disparities, where some schools had quality education, and then when you get to schools in the African American community or the Native American community, there was very low quality school programs. There was almost like a school to prison pipeline. Okay, police brutality and violence against black men, psychological and generational trauma. These are things that you just can't just brush over and forget that they ever happened. But once again, I want to focus on the solution because I do believe that there's a way out of the problems that we as a community have faced. Okay? Let's see. Let's talk about father absence rate because that is also a big problem. Fathers being absent in the home. And this is not just a problem that's in the black community, although it's more prevalent in the black community. In fact, as late as 2023, it says that approximately 47.5% of black children lived without a resident father. Okay. For white kids, this was about 21%. 21% of white fathers live apart from their children. That's 21% of white fathers. It also said that approximately 35% of Hispanic fathers live apart from their children. Okay? According to the data from the Annie E. Casey Foundation Kids Count Data Center, it says that black and African American, approximately 64% of black and African American children live in single parent families. As far as American Indians and Alaska Natives, that's about 52%, which is also a high number. Hispanic and Latino, about 42%. White, non-Hispanic, about 24%. And then Asian and Pacific Islander, about 16%. So, fatherlessness is a problem that's across the board when it comes to all the races, but particularly in the African American community. So, eventually, these are all problems that I want to discuss with the community on how to find solutions and how to actually do something about it instead of always talking about it. Okay? So, let's go to a solution-oriented mindset, which is the topic of today's podcast. There's a book by Brian Tracy called Goals. And in that, he emphasizes that successful people maintain solution-oriented mindset. So I want to apply that to the community. Okay? I call myself the community father. I take a responsibility in what's going on in my community. And I want to encourage the community to do the same. Okay? This is not a podcast where we're going to start fussing at people, belittling people and degrading and demeaning people for what hasn't been done. What we would like to do is starting now, going forward, what can we do as a community to help the problem that we see? And today's problem, I'm focusing primarily on our children's low performance. Okay? But my solution is not directly aimed at the children. It's more so aimed at the parents of those children. And so I have a plan. But let's talk about some of the solution-oriented mindset that Brian Tracy encourages us to have and how I've applied that to the community. Okay, excuse me, I've been a little bit under the weather. I'm just now getting over it. So if I sound a little bit congested, that's the problem. Okay, solution-oriented mindset, meaning they focus on finding answers rather than dwelling on the problem. He explains that he says people, I'm going to say communities, unsuccessful communities tend to get stuck in negativity, blame, excuses, while successful communities actively seek solutions and take responsibility for their progress. And so that's why if it seems like I have this optimism about the state of the Antelope Valley community, it's because I know that working together as a community with this solution oriented mindset, I think that we can bring change. We can bring a positive change to the Antelope Valley. So here are some steps. Here are some things that we're going to practice. We're going to reframe problems as challenges. Like I just read to you a whole list of issues on why African American students are struggling in the school. Well, I'm not going to look at those as problems. I'm going to look at those as challenges and what can we do. Instead of seeing struggling students and families as failures, the Village Project helps communities view these struggles as opportunities for growth and transformation. Every challenge is a stepping stone toward a stronger, more resilient community. And I really, that resonates with me, because I see good things coming out the Antelope Valley. A lot of people have kind of put the Antelope Valley on a back burner as a place where people go to die. I see it as something different. I see it as a place that could be an example to how the big cities should operate. And our community is just big enough, but it's also just small enough for us to come together and effect change. Take responsibility. Here's another one of the points. Take responsibility. Thriving communities don't blame schools, they don't blame governments or outside forces for their struggles. Instead, they take ownership of their progress, focusing on what they can do to create better outcomes for their children. The Village Project empowers parents and mentors to take action. Here's another one. Ask the right questions. Rather than asking, why are our children failing? Why are there very few black fathers in the home? Or who is the blame? Is the government to blame for our black men not being in the home? Is the government to blame for our children failing? And if we look at the state of our government right now, we can see that there's a lot of confusion. So what do? Wait for them to get it together before our children have access to quality programs and education? Or do we take it upon ourselves to do something about it? That's the question that I'm posing to you. So, a solution-oriented community asks, how can we create an environment where every child thrives? And what steps can we take today to improve our schools and homes? The project fosters discussions that lead to solutions, not just complaints. So let me be clear. I don't have all the answers. I do have some ideas that I would eventually like to share with you guys. But the goal of this podcast is to all of us to come together to start a discussion to come up with solutions to these problems. I think together as a community, we can solve these problems. All right? Maintain a positive attitude. I was talking to somebody about an issue the other day, and the first thing that came out their mouth is, you have to remember that you're only human. And that's good. We are. And, we're not perfect. We're flawed. But does that mean that we just kind of wallow in the failure that's being experienced in our schools? Do we just sit there and just think to ourselves, well, we're only human? Do we just accept the fact that there's very few men in the black community to be a role model to the kids and say, well, we're only human? Or do we come together in our humanness and work together to find a solution? I believe in the latter. Keep a positive mindset on these issues. Okay? A community focused on solution remains hopeful and determined. While challenges may seem overwhelming, The Village Project instills the belief that small, consistent efforts, better parenting habits, community engagement, and mentorship will lead to lasting change. And I want you to understand, I've broken this down in small, simple steps that when you hear what some of my ideas are, you will think to yourself, that's very doable. And not just the ideas that I have, but the ideas that some of my guest speakers will have. I'm going to be calling in parents who have had success as well as challenges raising their children. I'm going to be calling in teachers. Okay? I'm going to be also calling in leaders in the community, whether it be pastors, politicians, and we're going to discuss the solutions. And we're going to start doing the solution. We're going to start practicing some of the things that are being discussed. Because we can talk all day about what can be done, but what good does it do if you don't start doing the work to bring about change? Here's the final thing that Brian Tracy includes in having a solution-oriented mindset. He says a commitment to continuous learning. Okay? Communities that grow are communities that learn. Okay? So part of the reason why I'm going to be having guest speakers is so that we can learn from each other. Learning is a lifelong process. This is not something that we can figure out and be like, okay, we're done. No, from now on, we're learning. Okay, so the Village Projects, we encourage parents and mentors to embrace knowledge, whether from books, workshops, or shared experiences. By developing new habits and strategies, communities can break cycles of struggle and build a legacy of success. Okay? So, by coming together and talking out our great experiences, our success, sharing the struggles that we have had as parents, as teachers, as leaders in the community, and talking about solutions, workable, doable solutions, I believe that we could take the Antelope Valley to a different level. We can make the Antelope Valley a community in which Southern California looks to as an example of how a community should be ran. Thank you for joining me. My name is Michael Hodges, and I'm the community father. And thank you for joining me on the Village Project.